Sarah Chen walked through the metal hallways of Nexus Station. Her boots made soft sounds on the shiny floor. She was only 5 feet tall and looked very small next to all the huge aliens around her. Everyone who saw her thought the same thing. Humans were weak. Humans were fragile. Humans did not belong in a real fight. The station was the biggest trading place in the galaxy. Ships from hundreds of different worlds came here to buy and sell things. The aliens who worked here were all much bigger and stronger than humans. They had claws and fangs and thick skin like armor. When they looked at Sarah, they just saw a tiny creature who would break easily. Sarah stopped at a big board on the wall. It was covered with bright lights and moving pictures. The words said, "Galaxy Combat Tournament. 5 fighters. Winner takes all 1 million credits." She read every word carefully. This was what she had been looking for. A huge creature walked up behind her. It was Koroth, the Vraxian. He was 8 feet tall with muscles like steel cables. His yellow eyes glowed in the dark. Sharp claws grew from his fingers like knives. His mouth was full of teeth that could bite through metal. When he saw Sarah looking at the tournament sign, he started laughing. The sound was like rocks falling down a mountain. Other aliens heard Koroth laughing and came to see what was funny. Soon there was a crowd of different creatures all staring at the small human. There were lizard people with scales like green armor. There were insect beings with blade arms that could cut through anything. There were rock monsters whose fists could smash buildings. All of them were much bigger than Sarah. Koroth pointed, one huge claw at Sarah. His voice was deep and rough like grinding stones. He spoke in the common language that all species used for trading. Every alien on the station could understand what he said. "Humans are the weakest race in the galaxy," he announced to the crowd. "Look at this tiny thing. Her bones would snap like dry twigs. Her muscles are like wet paper. She has no claws, no fangs, no armor. What could she possibly do in a real fight?" The other aliens nodded and made sounds of agreement. A snake creature with glowing eyes slithered closer. Its body was as thick as a tree trunk and covered with shining scales. This was Venom, the Naga warrior. He was famous for crushing his enemies and poisoning them with his fangs. The human would not last 10 seconds in the ring, Venom hissed. His voice sounded like steam coming from a hot pipe. "I have fought creatures from 1,000 worlds. Humans are always the first to run away when there is danger. They hide behind their machines and their weapons because they are too weak to fight." With their own hands, more aliens gathered to listen. They loved hearing about how superior they were to the soft humans. Sarah stood very still and quiet while they talked about her. She did not show any anger or fear. Her face was calm like the surface of a deep lake. A giant insect creature clicked its way through the crowd. This was Skrix the Mantis warrior. She had 4 arms that ended in blades sharper than any sword. Her compound eyes could see in all directions at once. She had never lost a single fight in her entire life. Skrix looked down at Sarah with her many eyes. "The human is so small I might step on her by accident," she said. Her voice sounded like clicking metal. "On my world, we would use creatures like this for target practice. They are not worth fighting seriously." Another alien pushed through to join the conversation. This one looked like it was made of living rock. Its name was Brutus, and it was a golem from the crystal mines of Petra 7. Every step it took made the floor shake. Its fists were bigger than Sarah's entire head. "I once punched through a mountain," Brutus said. His voice boomed like thunder. "In a cave. This tiny human would be crushed to dust by the air pressure from my punch. She would not even need to be hit directly. Just standing near me when I fight would be enough to destroy her." The last alien to speak was different from the others. Zephyr was a saurian with green and gold scales. He moved like liquid lightning and his tail could break steel beams. But, unlike the others, he did not laugh or make jokes. He studied Sarah with intelligent yellow eyes. "The human seems very calm," Zephyr said quietly. "Most creatures show fear when they are threatened. She shows nothing. This is either because she is too stupid to understand the danger or because she knows something we do not." Koroth laughed even louder at this. "What could she possibly know that we do not? Humans have only been in space for a few hundred years. We have been warriors for thousands of years. She is probably just too scared to move or think properly. Sarah finally spoke for the first time. Her voice was soft, but everyone could hear it clearly. She spoke slowly and carefully so that all the aliens could understand her accent. "I would like to enter the tournament," she said simply. The crowd of aliens fell silent for a moment. Then they all started laughing at once. The sound was so loud that other creatures from all over the station came to see what was happening. Soon there were hundreds of aliens all pointing at Sarah and making jokes. Koroth wiped tears from his yellow eyes. He was laughing so hard he could barely speak. "You want to fight us," he gasped. "All 5 of us. In a real combat tournament with no weapons and no rules except knockout only. You think your tiny human body can defeat warriors who have conquered entire star systems?" Sarah nodded once. "Yes," she said. "I do." The tournament director heard about the commotion and came to investigate. It was a blob-like creature called Crix, who could change its shape like liquid. It flowed through the crowd until it reached Sarah. "Are you sure about this little human?" Crix asked. Its voice bubbled like boiling water. "This tournament is very dangerous. These 5 warriors are the strongest fighters on the station. Many creatures have tried to defeat them. All have failed. Most were seriously injured, some did not survive." Sarah looked up at the blob creature. She was completely calm and serious. "I understand the risks," she said. "I still want to compete." Crix made a gurgling sound that might have been laughter. "Well, your money is as good as anyone else's. The entry fee is 1,000 credits. If you can pay, you can play." Sarah reached into her pocket and pulled out a credit chip. She handed it to Crix, who scanned it with a tentacle. The chip was good. Sarah was now officially entered in the Galaxy Combat Tournament. The aliens in the crowd could not believe what they were seeing. They started making bets immediately. Everyone wanted to bet against the human. The odds were 10,000 to 1 that she would lose. Some aliens bet that she would not last more than 5 seconds. Others bet that she would run away before the fight even started. Sarah listened to all the betting and laughing, but she did not say anything more. She had said what she needed to say. Now she would let her actions speak for her. As the crowd slowly broke up, the 5 fighters looked at their new opponent one more time. They saw a tiny human female who barely came up to their waists. Her clothes were simple and plain. She had no visible weapons or armor. She looked like she had never been in a fight in her entire life. What they did not see was the way Sarah moved. Every step was perfectly balanced. Every movement was controlled and precise. Her breathing was deep and steady. Her eyes missed nothing. She watched each of them carefully, learning their patterns and habits. What they did not know was Sarah's history. She had trained in combat since she was a child. She had studied fighting styles from dozens of different worlds. She understood that size and strength were not the only things that mattered in a fight. Sometimes the smallest key could open the biggest door. As Sarah walked back to her quarters, she could feel hundreds of alien eyes watching her. They expected to see fear or doubt in her movements. Instead, they saw something they did not recognize. They saw confidence. They saw preparation. They saw someone who had come here with a plan. Tomorrow the tournament would begin. Tomorrow these aliens would learn that humans were not as weak as they appeared. Tomorrow Sarah Chen would start changing how the galaxy thought about her species. She had work to do. The arena was packed with thousands of alien spectators. Every seat was filled with creatures from across the galaxy. They had all come to watch the small human get crushed in her first fight. The betting booths were doing record business. Everyone wanted to bet against Sarah Chen. Giant screens showed the odds floating in bright numbers. Sarah Chen versus Koroth the Vraxian. 10,000 to 1 against the human. Some aliens had bet their entire savings that she would lose in less than 30 seconds. Others had bet that she would run away before the fight even started. Sarah walked into the fighter preparation area. It was a large room with benches and equipment for warming up. The other 4 fighters were already there watching her. They wanted to see how scared she looked before her first match. Koroth was doing practice swings with his massive claws. Each swipe cut through the air with a whistling sound. His muscles rippled under his gray skin like steel cables moving under a tarp. He was 8 feet tall and weighed over 400 pounds. His yellow eyes glowed with excitement as he thought about his easy victory. Sarah sat on a bench and began some simple stretching exercises. She moved slowly and calmly like she was getting ready for a morning walk instead of a death match. Her breathing was deep and steady. Her heart rate stayed normal. The other fighters found this very strange. Venom the Naga slithered closer to get a better look. His snake body coiled and uncoiled as he moved. His scales caught the light and shimmered like oil on water. He tasted the air with his forked tongue, trying to smell fear on the human. "She smells wrong." Venom hissed to the others. "Most creatures smell of fear before a fight. Their bodies make chemicals that I can taste in the air. This human smells like she is going to sleep, not going to battle." Scrix. The mantis clicked her blade arms together. The sound was like knives being sharpened. Her compound eyes watched Sarah from multiple angles at once. She had fought thousands of different creatures and knew what warriors looked like. Sarah did not look like any warrior she had ever seen. "Maybe she is in shock," Scrix suggested. Her voice clicked and buzzed like an old machine. Some creatures freeze when they realize they are about to die. Their minds cannot accept what is happening, so they become very calm and quiet. Brutus the golem stomped his rocky feet on the floor. Each step made the whole room shake. Dust fell from the ceiling every time he moved. His voice was like boulders rolling down a mountain when he spoke. "It does not matter if she is scared or calm or crazy." Brutus rumbled. "When I hit something, it breaks. Size does not matter. Speed does not matter. Toughness does not matter. My fist goes through everything." Zephyr the Saurian said nothing. He just watched Sarah with his intelligent yellow eyes. Something about the human bothered him, but he could not figure out what it was. She moved differently than other creatures. Every motion seemed to have a purpose, even when she was just sitting still. A loud buzzer sounded through the arena. It was time for the first fight to begin. Koroth stood up and flexed his huge muscles. His claws extended to their full length of 8 inches each. They gleamed like polished knives in the arena lights. "Time to end this quickly," Koroth growled. He looked down at Sarah, who was still sitting calmly on her bench. "The crowd will be disappointed if the fight lasts too long. They came to see destruction, not a long battle." Sarah stood up slowly. She was wearing simple black clothes that let her move freely. She had no armor, no weapons, no protection of any kind. Next to Koroth, she looked like a child standing next to a giant. The two fighters walked through a tunnel that led to the main arena. The sound of the crowd grew louder with each step. Thousands of voices were cheering and shouting. Most were calling Koroth's name. A few were making jokes about the tiny human. They emerged into the bright lights of the arena floor. The crowd noise was deafening. Aliens were standing on their seats and waving their arms. Some were holding signs with pictures of Koroth crushing tiny figures. Others were counting down from 10, expecting the fight to be over before they reached 0. The arena floor was a perfect circle, 50 feet across. The surface was made of a special metal that could absorb impacts without breaking. It had been tested with weapons that could destroy buildings. The walls around the arena were thick, transparent aluminum that could stop any attack. A referee floated down from the ceiling. It was a luminar made of pure energy that glowed like a small star. Its voice came from speakers all around the arena, so everyone could hear the rules clearly. "This is a knockout-only tournament," the luminar announced. "No weapons are allowed. No outside help is permitted. The fight continues until one fighter cannot continue. Medical teams are standing by. Fighters, take your positions." Koroth walked to one side of the arena. Every step he took left small dents in the metal floor. He raised his arms above his head and roared. The sound was like a wild animal mixed with a crashing spaceship. The crowd roared back even louder. Sarah walked to the opposite side. She moved quietly without making any sound. She did not wave to the crowd or make any gestures. She simply stood ready and waited for the fight to begin. The size difference was incredible. Koroth looked like he could pick Sarah up with one hand and throw her out of the arena. His claws were longer than her fingers. His arms were thicker than her entire body. The betting screens updated one more time. The odds against Sarah had gone up to 15,000 to 1. Some rich aliens were betting millions of credits that Koroth would win in under 10 seconds. Koroth crouched down like a predator getting ready to pounce. His muscles coiled like springs under pressure. His claws spread wide, ready to slash and tear. His yellow eyes focused on Sarah like laser beams. Sarah stood perfectly still. Her hands hung loose at her sides. Her feet were shoulder-width apart. She looked relaxed, like she was waiting for a bus instead of fighting for her life. The Luminar referee raised one glowing appendage. The crowd fell silent for just a moment. Then the appendage dropped, and the referee shouted the word that started everything. Begin. Koroth exploded forward like a missile. His massive body moved faster than anything that big should be able to move. His claws swept through the air in deadly arcs, aimed at cutting Sarah into pieces. The crowd held its breath, expecting to see blood spray across the arena floor, but Sarah was not there anymore. She had moved at the exact moment Koroth started his charge, not before when he might have been able to change direction, not after when it would have been too late, at the perfect moment when his momentum was committed and he could not stop or turn. Koroth's claws sliced through empty air. His huge body crashed into the arena wall where Sarah had been standing. The impact shook the entire building. Cracks appeared in the transparent aluminum barrier. The crowd was confused. Where had the human gone? How had she moved so fast? Koroth spun around looking for his opponent. His yellow eyes searched every corner of the arena. Sarah was standing behind him. She had moved around his charge like water flowing around a rock. She was close enough to touch him, but he did not even know she was there. Koroth turned and swung his claws in a wide circle. Sarah ducked under the attack and stepped closer. Koroth swung again. Sarah leaned back just enough for the claws to miss her face by inches. The crowd began to murmur. This was not what they had expected to see. The human was not running away screaming. She was not getting torn apart. She was moving like a dancer while the mighty Koroth stumbled around trying to hit her. Koroth grew frustrated. He began attacking faster and harder. His claws moved like lightning trying to catch the slippery human. But every attack missed. Sarah seemed to know where he was going to strike before he did. She was reading his body language, the way his muscles tensed before he moved, the direction his eyes looked before he attacked, the shift of his weight before he changed direction. Koroth was strong and fast, but he was also predictable. After 2 minutes of missing every attack, Koroth was breathing hard. His massive body needed lots of energy to keep moving. Sweat was running down his gray skin. His movements were getting slower. Sarah had barely moved except to avoid his attacks. Her breathing was still calm and steady. She was not tired at all. She was just getting started. When Koroth paused to catch his breath, Sarah finally made her move. She stepped forward and placed one small hand on his chest. The touch looked gentle, like she was just saying hello. But Sarah's palm strike hit a very specific spot, right where several important nerves came together. The impact traveled through Koroth's body like an earthquake. His diaphragm stopped working. His lungs could not pull in air. Koroth's eyes went wide with shock and panic. He could not breathe. He tried to roar, but no sound came out. He staggered backward, clutching his chest. Before he could recover, Sarah moved behind him. Her fingers found 2 precise points on his thick neck, pressure points that controlled blood flow to his brain. She pressed gently for exactly 3 seconds. Koroth's yellow eyes rolled back in his head. His massive body swayed like a tree in a strong wind. Then he fell forward like a mountain collapsing. The arena floor shook when he hit. The crowd was completely silent. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Nobody could believe what they had just seen. The medical team rushed out to check on Koroth. Their scanners showed he was unconscious but completely unharmed. He would wake up in a few minutes with nothing worse than a headache. The preparation room was much quieter when Sarah returned. The 4 remaining fighters were no longer laughing or making jokes. They watched her walk to her bench with very different eyes than before. Koroth had been their strongest fighter, and he was now sleeping in the medical bay. News of Sarah's victory was spreading through the station like wildfire. Aliens who had missed the first fight were rushing to the arena. The betting screens were flashing constantly as odds changed every Few seconds. Sarah Chen was no longer a joke, she was now a serious threat. Zephyr the Saurian was next to fight. Unlike the others, he had not been surprised by Sarah's victory. He had seen something different about the human from the beginning. Now he knew what it was. She was a predator disguised as prey. Zephyr began his warm-up routine. His green and gold scales rippled as he moved. His body was built for speed and precision. He could strike faster than most creatures could see. His tail was like a whip made of steel and muscle. I underestimated her too, Zephyr said to the other fighters. His voice was calm and thoughtful. She moves like water. She sees attacks before they happen. She knows exactly where to strike to cause maximum damage with minimum effort. Scrix clicked her blade arms nervously. Her compound eyes had recorded every moment of the first fight. She had watched it back in slow motion, trying to understand what had happened. The human's technique is very strange, Scrix observed. She does not fight like any species I have seen before. She uses the opponent's strength against them instead of opposing it directly. It is like fighting smoke or shadow. Brutus was angry that Koroth had lost. His rocky fists clenched and unclenched as he thought about his upcoming fight. He had been friends with the Vraxian warrior for many years. Koroth was careless. Brutus rumbled. He let his anger control him instead of thinking clearly. I will not make the same mistake. I will be more careful. I will crush her slowly and make sure she cannot escape. Venom said nothing, but his scales changed color. They shifted, from bright green to dark red, showing his emotional state. He was no longer confident about winning the tournament. The human had shown abilities that made no sense according to everything he knew about her species. Sarah sat quietly on her bench. She was not celebrating her victory or talking about her next fight. She was thinking about Zephyr and what she had observed about him. He was different from Koroth in many important ways. Koroth had been all muscle and aggression. He fought like a wild animal using pure strength and fury. Zephyr was much more intelligent. He studied his opponents carefully. He planned his attacks. He was patient and precise. Sarah remembered watching Zephyr move during his warm-up exercises. His reflexes were incredibly fast. His tail could change direction in mid-strike. His scales were thick enough to turn aside most weapons. He would not be easy to defeat. The buzzer sounded again. It was time for the second fight. Sarah and Zephyr walked through the tunnel toward the arena. The crowd noise was even louder than before. Word had spread across the station and beyond. Ships were arriving just to watch the tournament. They emerged into the bright lights to face a very different crowd than before. The aliens were still excited, but now they were also curious. Many were studying Sarah carefully, trying to figure out how she had defeated Koroth. Others were placing new bets with much better odds for the human. The arena floor had been repaired after Koroth's impact with the wall. The medical teams were ready with more equipment than before. Everyone expected this fight to be more intense than the first one. The Luminar referee floated down to give the same speech about rules, but this time the crowd listened more carefully. They had learned not to assume they knew how the fight would end. Zephyr took his position on one side of the arena. He did not roar or beat his chest like Koroth had done. Instead, he moved through a series of precise stretches and practice strikes. Each movement was controlled and purposeful. Sarah took her position on the opposite side. She looked exactly the same as before, calm, relaxed, and ready. But now the crowd knew that her peaceful appearance was hiding something dangerous. The betting screens showed new odds. Sarah was now only 100 to 1 against instead of 15,000 to 1. Some smart aliens had made fortunes betting on her in the first fight. Others were now betting their winnings on her to beat Zephyr. The Luminar referee raised its glowing appendage. The crowd fell silent faster this time. Everyone wanted to see what would happen when speed met precision. Begin. Zephyr moved like liquid lightning. His attack was nothing like Koroth's wild charge. Instead, he circled Sarah at incredible speed while his tail struck from different angles. Each strike was aimed at a vital spot with surgical precision. Sarah turned slowly in the center of the circle. She kept her eyes on Zephyr but did not try to follow his movement directly. Instead, she watched for patterns in his attacks. Every fighter had habits, even the best ones. Zephyr's tail snapped toward Sarah's knee. She lifted her leg just enough for the tail to pass underneath. The tail whipped back toward her shoulder. She leaned slightly to let it miss by inches. Each dodge looked effortless but required perfect timing. The crowd was amazed by what they were seeing. Zephyr was moving so fast he was almost a blur. His tail was striking multiple times per second. But somehow, Sarah was avoiding every single attack without even appearing to try very hard. Zephyr increased his speed. His body became a streak of green and gold as he circled faster and faster. His tail strikes came from every possible angle. High, low, left, right, diagonal, spiral, curved, straight. He used every technique he had learned in decades of fighting. Sarah continued her slow turn in the center. She was like the eye of a hurricane while chaos whirled around her. Her breathing stayed steady. Her heartbeat remained normal. She was reading the pattern of Zephyr's attacks like a book. After 3 minutes of constant motion, Zephyr began to slow down slightly. Even his incredible stamina had limits. His strikes were still fast and accurate, but not quite as lightning quick as before. That was when Sarah saw what she had been waiting for. A tiny gap in Zephyr's pattern. A moment when his tail would be extended and his body would be committed to a particular direction. It only lasted for a fraction of a second, but that was enough. Sarah moved for the first time since the fight began. She stepped directly into Zephyr's path, while his tail was striking behind her. For just an instant, she was inside his defenses where his speed advantage meant nothing. Zephyr tried to change direction, but his momentum carried him forward. Sarah reached out and grabbed his tail with both hands. The impact should have torn her arms off, but she had caught it at exactly the right moment when the force was moving sideways instead of directly at her. Using Zephyr's own speed against him, Sarah spun in a complete circle. The Saurian warrior found himself flying through the air completely out of control. His perfect balance and precise movements meant nothing when he was not touching the ground. Zephyr crashed into the arena wall with tremendous force. The transparent, aluminum barrier cracked from the impact. He fell to the floor stunned and disoriented. His scales had changed from green and gold to a dull gray, showing his shock and confusion. Sarah was already moving toward him. Zephyr tried to recover, but his inner ear was still spinning from the throw. He could not tell which way was up. His fast reflexes were useless when his brain could not process what his eyes were seeing. Sarah knelt beside the fallen warrior. Her hand found the nerve cluster at the base of his skull where all Saurians kept their primary nervous system junction. She pressed gently but firmly on the exact spot that would shut down his consciousness without causing damage. Zephyr's yellow eyes focused on Sarah's face for just a moment. In them she saw respect and understanding. He knew he had been beaten by a superior fighter. Then his eyes closed and he went to sleep. The crowd erupted in cheers even louder than before. They had just watched something that should have been impossible. The fastest fighter in the galaxy had been defeated by a human who barely seemed to move. The medical team rushed out to check on Zephyr. Like Karath, he was unconscious but completely unharmed. He would wake up with nothing worse than a headache and a bruised ego. Sarah helped carry Zephyr to the medical area. She showed the same respect for him that she had shown for Koroth. The crowd appreciated this gesture. It showed that she was not just a fighter but also a warrior with honor. As Sarah walked back to the preparation area, the remaining 3 fighters watched her with new eyes. She had now defeated strength and speed using different techniques each time. They were beginning to realize that they were not facing an ordinary opponent. The betting screens were going crazy again. Sarah's odds kept getting better as more aliens put money on the small human. Some were even betting that she would win the entire tournament. But Sarah was not thinking about winning or losing. She was thinking about her next opponent. Each fight taught her something new about her own abilities and about the different ways that creatures could be dangerous. 3 fights remained. 3 more chances to prove that humans belonged among the elite warriors of the galaxy. 3 more tests of everything she had learned about combat and about herself. The hardest battles were still ahead. The preparation room felt like a tomb when Sarah returned from her second victory. Only 3 fighters remained besides her. Scrix, the mantis warrior, sat perfectly still with her blade arms folded. Brutus the golem stood like a statue made of Angry stone. Venom the Naga coiled and uncoiled, his long body showing his nervousness. News feeds across the galaxy were now carrying live coverage of the tournament. Alien governments were watching. Military commanders were taking notes. Scientists were trying to understand how a human could defeat warriors who had conquered entire star systems. The betting had become frantic. Sarah's odds had dropped to only 10 to 1 against. Some wealthy aliens were mortgaging their homes to bet on her. Others were betting everything they owned that she would finally lose. The total amount of money changing hands was enough to buy a small planet. Scrix stood up slowly. Her 4 blade arms gleamed under the lights like polished mirrors. She had been analyzing every moment of Sarah's previous fights. Her compound eyes had recorded everything from multiple angles simultaneously. "I have found a weakness in the humans," Technique Scrix announced to the others. Her voice clicked and buzzed with mechanical precision. "She relies on reading her opponent's movements before they attack. But my species does not telegraph our strikes the way others do." Brutus turned, his massive rocky head toward the insect warrior. His voice rumbled like an earthquake when he spoke. "What do you mean by that?" he asked. Scrix's blade arms moved in a complex pattern as she explained. "Most creatures tense their muscles before they strike. They shift their weight. They focus their eyes on their target. These are the signals the human reads to predict attacks. But mantis warriors attack from a state of relaxation. We do not prepare. We simply strike." The other fighters considered this information. It made sense. Sarah had defeated Koroth by reading his aggressive posturing. She had beaten Zephyr by recognizing the patterns in his speed attacks. But how could she predict something that had no warning signs? Venom's scales shifted from red to orange, showing cautious hope. His forked tongue tasted the air as he thought about Scrix's words. "If you can defeat the human, then perhaps the rest of us still have a chance," he hissed. "But if you fail, then we must find another way to beat her. She has shown abilities that should not be possible for her species." The buzzer sounded for the third fight. Scrix rose to her full height of 7 feet. Her 4 arms moved independently as she warmed up. Each blade arm was as sharp as a laser cutter and twice as fast. She had never been touched by an opponent in over 200 fights. Sarah and Scrix walked through the tunnel toward the arena. The crowd noise was deafening now. Aliens were screaming and cheering from dozens of different worlds. Some were chanting Sarah's name. Others were calling for Scrix to restore alien pride. They emerged into light so bright they turned night into day. Camera drones buzzed overhead, recording every angle. The arena had been reinforced again after Zephyr's impact. The medical teams now had equipment that could handle any kind of injury. The crowd fell silent when they saw Scrix moving through her pre-fight routine. Her blade arms created patterns too fast for most eyes to follow. She looked like a living weapon designed for only one purpose: killing. Sarah took her position and waited calmly. She had studied Scrix during the warm-up period. The mantis warrior was right about not telegraphing her attacks. But every fighter had weaknesses. Sarah just needed to find them. The Luminar referee gave the signal to begin. Scrix attacked immediately without any warning or preparation. Her 4 blade arms moved in completely different directions, creating a storm of cutting edges that filled the space around Sarah. For the first time in the tournament, Sarah looked like she might be in real trouble. She dodged and weaved between the blades, but some came very close to hitting her. The crowd held its breath as razor-sharp edges passed within inches of the human's body. Scrix pressed her attack relentlessly. Her blades moved faster than hummingbird wings. She attacked high and low simultaneously. She struck from front and back at the same time. No single creature should have been able to avoid so many attacks coming from so many directions. But Sarah was not trying to avoid every blade. She was studying the pattern of the attacks. Even random movements had rules. Even chaos had structure if you knew how to look for it. After 2 minutes of constant motion, Sarah found what she was looking for. Scrix's 4 arms moved independently, but they were controlled by one brain. That brain had to coordinate all 4 attacks while also controlling movement and balance. It was an incredibly complex task even for a mantis warrior. Sarah saw the tiny hesitation that occurred every 12 strikes. A microsecond pause while Scrix's brain processed information and planned the next series of attacks. It was so brief that most creatures would never notice it, but Sarah had been trained to see things that others missed. When the 12th strike came, Sarah moved directly into the storm of blades. The crowd gasped, thinking she had made a fatal mistake. But Sarah had timed her movement perfectly. She stepped into the gap between attacks when all 4 blade arms were extended and unable to change direction. Sarah grabbed 2 of Scrix's arms and crossed them over each other. The Mantis warrior's own momentum caused her blades to tangle together. For just a moment she was trapped by her own weapons. That moment was all Sarah needed. She struck the nerve cluster in Scrix's thorax with surgical precision. The insect warrior's nervous system overloaded instantly. Her compound eyes went dark as consciousness left her body. Scrix collapsed to the arena floor with her blade arms, still tangled together. The medical team rushed out to separate her weapons and check her condition. Like the others, she was unconscious but unharmed. The crowd erupted in amazement. 3 victories, 3 impossible defeats. The small human had beaten strength, speed, and precision using different techniques each time, but there was no time to celebrate. Brutus the golem was already walking toward the arena entrance. His massive stone body shook the ground with every step. He was angry about waiting and determined to end Sarah's winning streak immediately. The arena crew barely had time to clear away Scrix's unconscious form before Brutus stomped onto the fighting surface. He did not wait for introductions or referee instructions. He simply started attacking the moment he saw Sarah. Brutus swung fists the size of boulders. Each punch created craters in the metal floor where Sarah had been standing moments before. His strength was beyond anything the previous fighters had possessed. If any of his attacks connected, Sarah would be crushed instantly. The crowd watched in fascination as the tiny human danced around the stone giant. She looked like a butterfly avoiding a landslide. Every movement had to be perfect because there was no room for error against an opponent who could kill with a single touch. Brutus grew more frustrated with each missed punch. His attacks became wilder and more destructive. He was tearing up the arena floor and cracking the walls, but he could not touch the elusive human. Sarah was studying the golem's attack patterns just as she had with the others. Brutus was incredibly strong, but his strength came with limitations. His massive body was slow to change direction. His rock composition made him top-heavy. His anger was making him careless. Most importantly, Brutus was using all of his energy for offense. He was not protecting himself because he believed his stone skin made him invulnerable. But Sarah had learned that every defense had weaknesses, if you knew where to look. Sarah began targeting the joints between Brutus's rock plates. These were the weak points where his stone armor was thinnest. She delivered rapid strikes to his elbows, knees, and shoulders. Each hit was precisely placed to disrupt the energy flows that held his body together. The crowd could not understand what Sarah was doing. Her attacks looked like raindrops hitting a mountain. But slowly Brutus began to weaken. His movements became more sluggish. His balance became less stable. When Brutus raised both fists above his head for a massive overhead strike, Sarah saw her opportunity. She stepped directly beneath him and struck the critical pressure point at the base of his skull. It was the keystone that held his entire rocky structure together. Brutus froze in mid-attack. His yellow eyes went wide with surprise. Then his massive body began to crumble like a demolished building. Chunks of stone fell harmlessly around Sarah as the mighty golem collapsed into a pile of rubble. The medical team rushed out with special equipment designed for golem physiology. They began reassembling Brutus's body while monitoring his life signs. He would be fine once they put him back together properly. 4 victories. 4 impossible defeats. The crowd was no longer cheering in amazement. They were sitting in stunned silence, trying to process what they had witnessed. Sarah stood in the center of the arena, surrounded by the aftermath of 2 battles. Her clothes were dusty, but she was completely uninjured. She had defeated 4 legendary warriors without taking a single hit. Only one fighter remained. Venom the Naga was the most dangerous opponent yet. He combined intelligence with deadly poison and crushing strength. He had been watching all of Sarah's fights and learning her techniques. As Sarah walked back to the preparation area, she knew the hardest battle was still ahead. But she also knew something else. She had proven that humans belonged among the galaxy's elite warriors. Now the preparation room was empty except for Sarah and Venom. 4 unconscious warriors lay in the medical bay recovering from their defeats. The Naga warrior coiled his massive serpentine body in the corner, watching Sarah with intelligent eyes that missed nothing. The entire galaxy was now watching the tournament. News feeds carried the story to every inhabited world. Military academies were studying recordings of Sarah's fights. Philosophers were debating what her victories meant for the future of interspecies relations. Venom was different from all the previous fighters. He did not boast or threaten or show off his strength. Instead, he studied Sarah like a scientist examining a fascinating new specimen. His scales shifted through different colors as his emotions changed from curiosity to respect to determination. "You are not what you appear to be," Venom said quietly. His voice was like steam escaping from a pressure valve. "I have fought creatures from 1,000 worlds. I have never seen anyone move the way you move or think the way you think." Sarah sat on her bench, stretching her muscles and preparing for the final battle. She had used different techniques against each opponent, but Venom would be the ultimate test. He combined the intelligence of Zephyr with the patience of Scrix and strength that rivaled Brutus. "What are you really?" Venom continued. His forked tongue tasted the air around Sarah, trying to read her chemical signature. "You smell human, but you fight like something else entirely. Like water that has learned to think. Like wind that has chosen to take solid form." Sarah finished her stretching and looked directly at Venom. Her voice was calm and steady when she answered. "I am exactly what I appear to be," she said. "I am a human being who has trained very hard for a very long time, nothing more and nothing less." Venom's scales shifted to a deep purple color, showing his skepticism. His coils moved restlessly as he processed this information. "Impossible," he hissed. "Humans have been in space for only a few centuries. We have been warriors for millennia. You cannot have learned in such a short time what has taken us generations to master." Sarah stood up and began some final warm-up exercises. Her movements were fluid and precise, like a dancer preparing for the most important performance of her life. "Time is not the only teacher," she replied. "Sometimes wisdom comes from understanding rather than experience. Sometimes the student learns faster than the master expects." The buzzer sounded for the final fight. Both warriors walked through the tunnel toward the arena. The crowd noise was unlike anything either of them had ever heard. Millions of aliens across the galaxy were watching. The outcome of this fight would change how every species viewed humanity. They emerged into an arena that had been transformed into a cathedral of light and sound. Every seat was filled. Standing room was sold out. Ships orbited the station just to be near the historic event. The betting had reached astronomical levels, with entire fortunes hanging on the outcome. Venom slithered onto the fighting surface with deadly grace. His body was 30 feet long and covered with scales that could turn aside laser weapons. His fangs dripped with poison that could paralyze any known life form. His coils could crush armored vehicles. Sarah walked to her position looking exactly as she had for every previous fight. Small, calm, and apparently helpless. But now everyone knew that appearances could be deceiving. The crowd watched her with the respect reserved for legends. The arena had been rebuilt one final time with the strongest materials available. The medical team had equipment capable of handling any emergency. Camera drones captured every angle. For the historical record, the Luminar referee floated down to address the fighters. This time its words carried extra weight because everyone knew they were witnessing something that would be remembered for generations. Final fight of the Galaxy Combat Tournament, the referee announced. Venom of the Naga Empire versus Sarah Chen of Earth. Winner takes the championship and 1 million galactic credits. Fighters, are you ready? Both warriors nodded. Venom's scales had settled into a pattern of silver and black, showing his complete focus. Sarah's breathing was deep and controlled as she centered herself for the most important fight of her life. The referee raised its glowing appendage. The crowd fell silent so completely that the only sound was the hum of the station's life support. systems. Then the appendage dropped and the final battle began. Begin. Venom did not attack immediately like the others had done. Instead, he began a slow circling movement around Sarah while keeping his distance. His intelligent eyes studied every detail of her posture and positioning. He had watched all of her previous fights and knew better than to rush in blindly. Sarah turned slowly to keep facing Venom as he circled. She was also studying her opponent, looking for weaknesses in his defense. This would be a battle of minds as much as bodies. After a full minute of circling, Venom made his first move. But instead of attacking, he began to speak. His voice was hypnotic and soothing, like a gentle stream flowing over smooth stones. "You have fought well, little human," he said while continuing to circle. "You have shown skills that honor your species, but now you face a creature who has mastered combat for longer than your world has had civilization." Sarah did not respond verbally, but Venom could see that his words were having no effect. Her concentration remained perfect. Her guard stayed up. She was not going to be distracted by psychological warfare. Venom tried a different approach. He began moving in complex patterns that were designed to confuse and disorient opponents. His long body created spirals and loops that hurt to look at directly. Most creatures became dizzy just watching him move. But Sarah had trained for exactly this kind of attack. She had learned to focus on specific points rather than trying to track the entire serpentine form. She watched Venom's head, which showed his intentions. She watched his tail, which revealed his balance. She ignored everything else. When Venom finally struck, he did so with incredible speed and precision. His fangs aimed for Sarah's neck while his tail swept toward her legs. It was a coordinated attack designed to leave no escape route. Sarah dropped low and rolled forward between Venom's coils. His fangs snapped shut on empty air while his tail missed her by inches. She came up behind his head where his massive body blocked his own vision. Venom spun quickly to face her, but Sarah was already moving. She used his own body as cover, staying in his blind spots while he tried to bring his weapons to bear. It was like a deadly game of hide and seek played at lightning speed. The crowd watched in fascination as the two fighters engaged in the most complex battle of the tournament. There were no wild charges or brute force attacks. This was pure skill against pure skill with no margin for error. Venom began using his entire body as a weapon. His coils created moving walls that tried to trap Sarah, while his head and tail attacked from different directions. He was like a living maze that changed its configuration every few seconds. Sarah flowed through the maze like water finding its way downhill. Every gap in Venom's defenses became a pathway. Every opening became an opportunity. She was reading the pattern of his movements and finding the spaces between them. But Venom was also adapting to her tactics. He began varying his patterns to make them less predictable. He used his intelligence to stay one step ahead of her analysis. The battle became a contest of adaptation, with each fighter constantly evolving their strategy. For 10 minutes, they fought without either gaining a clear advantage. Sarah landed several precise strikes, but Venom's scales were too thick to penetrate easily. Venom came close to catching Sarah in his coils, but she always found a way to slip free at the last second. The crowd was spellbound by the display of skill from both fighters. This was combat elevated to the level of art. Every movement had purpose. Every technique showed mastery. It was the kind of battle that would be studied and admired for centuries. Then Sarah did something that no one expected. She stopped trying to avoid Venom's attacks and instead began moving toward them. She was no longer playing defense. She was taking the fight directly to her opponent. Venom was confused by this change in tactics. Sarah appeared to be walking directly into his most dangerous attacks. His fangs struck at her repeatedly, but somehow never quite connected. His coils wrapped around the space where she had been, but never where she actually was. Sarah was using a technique that few beings in the galaxy understood. She was fighting not just against Venom, but also with him. She was turning their battle into a kind of deadly dance where both fighters moved together in perfect synchronization. Every time Venom attacked, Sarah moved in such a way that his strike became part of her own movement. She was redirecting his energy rather than opposing it. She was making his strength work for her instead of against her. Slowly, Venom began to tire from the constant attacking. His massive body required enormous energy to keep moving. His frustration grew as none of his techniques succeeded in catching the elusive human. That was when Sarah saw her opening. Venom overextended on a particularly complex combination attack. For just a moment, his head was positioned perfectly while his body was committed to a movement he could not change. Sarah stepped forward and placed both hands on Venom's head, just behind his eyes. Her touch was gentle, almost like a caress. But her fingers found the exact pressure points that controlled Anaga's nervous system. Venom's eyes went wide with